Welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations, and thank you for supporting our mission to enlighten, encourage, and empower our viewers from around the world to be willing and ready to have uncomfortable conversations with our children, relatives, friends, and peers who may have dissimilar perspectives, and more likely than not, they will have dissimilar perspectives to us. Would you agree if we're willing to listen without judgment, argument, or debate? We allow ourselves the opportunity to learn a dissimilar perspective and confront our biases, assumptions, and stereotypes that prohibit our growth. For example, our last episode was about adoption versus abortion. And most of us agree that it's a woman's right to choose. Nevertheless, it's not an easy conversation to have with, say, the father and grandparents if they don't share the same perspective. So every week, Jill and I have the opportunity to introduce conversations that give us the opportunity to listen and learn a dissimilar perspective without any judgment, argument, or debate. And today's conversation is something I'm very familiar with having myself as a 2-time breast cancer survivor. That's me. How do you have a conversation about a cancer diagnosis with children and family? So by the end of today's show, I'm hoping that you're going to be enlightened, encouraged, and empowered to have the right verbal tools to do that. So let's get started. If it's your first time tuning into our show, welcome. My name is CJ Grace. I'm author of the comic self-help memoir, My Wild Ride, How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity. And my first self-help book was Adulterer's Wife, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not. I'm honored to host today's show with my friend Jill McLennan, death doula, end-of-life coach, and podcaster. So Jill, welcome, and let us know some of the conversation strategies you use as a death doula.
Thank you, CJ. It's always nice to be here with you. And that is one of the main jobs that I have as a death doula, is really helping people navigate difficult conversations around topics that we've typically avoided most of our lives. We don't want to talk about death. We don't want to talk about dying. We don't want to talk about diagnosis that might lead to those things sooner than later. And so really when I work with people, especially if you've gotten a new diagnosis, you need to share this with your close family members, your friends. Start the conversation gradually. It's not something that you have to jump into all at once. You don't have to explain every single detail about everything all in one sitting. And you can ask them too, what do you already know about cancer, especially if we're talking about breast cancer? What do you know about it? What do you know about the treatments? Just to kind of see what they're already thinking, what they might believe. Give them some information in small chunks and don't overwhelm people. And a lot of times we get those uncomfortable silences. Don't worry about filling an uncomfortable silence. If somebody needs some time to process, just let them process. You can hold their hands, you can hug them, just really do things to kind of ease the conversation for everybody. But also remember, if you're part of the other end of that conversation, be aware of not trying to say, oh, my mom went through this. I already know all this stuff. Or, when I went through it, this is what happened. Let that person share their experience with you first.
And how, Jill, are we as a network honoring Mental Health Awareness Month?
May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and the mission is to address the many challenges that face millions of people around the world living with mental health conditions. Throughout the month, organizations actively participate in this national movement dedicated to eradicating stigmas, extending support, fostering public education, and advocating for policies that prioritize the well-being of individuals affected by mental illness. A recent report from the CDC reported that 1 billion people suffer from mental disorders worldwide. Let's make health literacy a part of our daily conversation. And we have a video that will make us more aware of some of the anxiety that people deal with.
Stress is a natural part of our lives. We wouldn't be normal if we didn't experience stress. However, living with prolonged stress is bad for both our mental and physical health. It can lead to anxiety, depression, loss of confidence, and self-esteem. It can also lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, lowered immunity and gastric problems. When demands around us exceed our internal resources and everyday ability to cope, stress is a distressing feeling that occurs, and if it isn't resolved, it can tip us into anxiety and the inability to function well. Moderate stress can take us to a state where we feel alert and focused, and like our minds and bodies are functional optimally. This is a good place to be. When the stress levels increase, or the same stress levels are around for prolonged periods, it can tip us into anxiety. No two people can tolerate stress in the same way. Some people can manage stress at work, but cannot manage stress relating to family. Others can manage stress well unless it is related to health or finances. Some people overeat when they are experiencing a period of stress. Some lose their appetite. Some people sleep lots. Others become insomniacs. Others experience effects like having an upset stomach or being short-tempered. We are all different. At Able Futures, we can support people to identify what's triggering their stress and to recognize the patterns that they've developed to deal with their stress. Then we can support them to unravel the pattern and learn new, healthy ways to deal with the stress. For more information about how Able Futures can support you if you are experiencing negative effects of stress, visit the Able Futures website or call Able Futures on 0800 321 3137 to arrange regular.
So those are the resources for people in the UK. I will say that I'm coming across a lot of people who found that they had mental illness arising from different pharmaceutical drugs that they were on, and they realized once they were off them, even things like the contraceptive pill can create depression, and the pill for weight loss that people are on. These can have very strong effects on your psyche, and so it's always a good idea to look at that too if you're experiencing mental illness, if you've started a new drug, or if a pharmaceutical drug is having an effect on you that way. So it's worth taking a look at it. Doesn't always happen, but it certainly happens enough to because I'm hearing it from a lot of people that they felt so much better when they were off on a particular drug, you know.
Yeah, and it's definitely important to take your health into your own hands and ask questions, and definitely don't always just take everything at face value and go along with what the doctors are suggesting without, asking some questions about it. And CJ, why are we having this conversation on cancer, and why is it important that we are mentally prepared to listen without assumptions?
Well, cancer diagnoses are actually skyrocketing at the moment. Doctors are faced with a lot of turbo cancers that are, they're diagnosed at late stage like never before. There are a lot of theories as to why that's happening. Some of them are controversial, but it's important to be able to cope with that particular diagnosis and cope with having a family member or somebody already close to having that diagnosis. And having gone through breast cancer twice myself, I know that it is very hard for people to navigate that. I have in my book, My Wild Ride, How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity, I have a section called Cancer Etiquette, because most people are pretty clueless to know how to deal with that and how to talk to somebody who's going through it. So I go through very specifically some of the things that I came across that really were not super helpful. I mean, there's some people kind of blame you and they say, oh, well, you got cancer because you shouldn't be eating dairy, or you're too stressed, and if you weren't so tense you wouldn't get cancer. It really helps to shout at somebody that they're too tense to make them relax. But there's certain people who do that, and that's not helpful. One friend of mine was sending me all these emails about the millions of things that cause cancer. Well, I already had cancer. I didn't need to see those emails. I needed something that was uplifting. So I learned how to sort of shut out some of the advice and the comments I got that really weren't that helpful. And it became something that I felt I had to write about in my book, how to actually deal with those conversations, because it's really important. Some people won't even want to talk to you because they don't know what's going to happen, especially if they think you might be dying. They say, so you find people don't even bother to stay in touch because it's their fear that they have themselves. I mean, you're the one with cancer, but a lot of people, when they see you with cancer, it brings a huge sense of fear up in them, and they don't really know how to deal with it. In a similar way, when you're dealing with advocating for people who are in the process of dying, I'm sure you see that family members are not that well equipped to deal with those kinds of things. And I think it's great that the show today is going to enlighten people on exactly what to do. You just have to be honest and open and ask the person, well, how do you feel? What do you want? What can I do to help? You don't have to give them a litany of your own health problems to try and sort of compete with them, because I had that too. That's kind of interesting. Oh yes, you've had breast cancer. Well, I had it so bad that you're going to have radiation. Oh my God, when I had radiation, I thought I was going to die. It was the worst experience I ever had in my life. That's what somebody told me. And if I hadn't already had breast cancer on the other side and had radiation, I would have been really terrified from that. I mean, radiation is not a pleasant thing to go through, but when you have breast cancer, the radiation on your breast is nowhere near as difficult to deal with as, say, having it on your throat, because this particular guy had throat cancer. But so you have to be kind of careful and think about, well, how would this feel to me if I was the person receiving that advice? Would that make me feel better or worse? And if it's going to make them feel worse, maybe you should not say it. If you can't, it's a bit like that quote from Bambi. I don't know if you remember the Disney movie Bambi and Thumper. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I think I'm paraphrasing what the bunny's mom was telling the bunny. If you can't say something that's going to be nice and helpful to somebody who's going through cancer, it's best not to say it. Because if it's not going to go down well. They've already got enough stress. They don't need you hitting them over the head with a mallet. You got cancer because of your lifestyle. It's all your fault. You're terrible. No, we don't want to hear that when we're going through cancer. So there you go. So anyway, there are a few. It's a life-changing conversation, and it affects the individual, the family, friends, and co-workers. And cancer is one of those really difficult conversations, and that's our show, Uncomfortable Conversations. And it's a conversation that isn't taught in our schools or by our parents, so it's necessary to understand the do's and don'ts of being a good listener. So let's watch this video of a mother who was just diagnosed with cancer and how she was terrified to tell her children and family about it.
I was terrified. To tell my kids that I have cancer was obviously a very scary moment in my life. The second I told my then 5-year-old, I just saw her face kind of go dark, and she said, "But that's what Yaya Georgia had." She knew that her grandmother had died of this very same thing that I was sitting down and telling her that I had. And she's worried that I'm going to die. So that was definitely a dagger through the heart. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was in college. And unfortunately, when she was diagnosed, it was already at stage 3. And that was, frankly, from not having gone to her gynecologist for about 3 or 4 years. So had she been more on top of her health care and her doctor's appointments, it probably could have been caught sooner, prevented, and had a different outcome. And, it's hard for me to even say it, but there was this feeling when I was diagnosed that I'm just like her. In the same way that someone looks at me and says, "Oh, you have her smile, you have her laugh." It's like, you have her cancer. I, unlike my mother, caught it very early, and I was like, I'm not giving this any chance. I decided to do a double mastectomy a month later, and I am in recovery. My daughters are now 5 and 8 years old, so they're very knowledgeable about the disease. And I think when the time is right, I want to talk to them about, all the preventative care, and that they need to be more on top of it than some of their friends because there is a family history. but I'm not quite ready to put that burden on their shoulders yet.
This woman enlightened us about how a cancer diagnosis causes complex feelings and lifestyle changes that can be overwhelming for the person who receives the diagnosis and the people they are close to. Understanding the potential changes in the way they relate to specific family members and friends may help you take steps to grow and maintain healthy, mutually supportive relationships during a challenging time. So, CJ, who did we invite to empower us with the right verbal and emotional tools to have this conversation about cancer?
Well, as we heard from the woman in the video, having a cancer conversation with children, with your own children, is terrifying because it's a conversation that does change everything. And during the show, we're going to discuss various conversation strategies to be able to tell our children about this kind of diagnosis. And to empower us on doing that, we've invited Lauren Huffmaster, metastatic breast cancer survivor of 6 years. And she's the founder of Adventure Therapy Foundation and the podcast Adventures with Scars. And she's also a co-creator of the app Rise. Lauren acknowledges the emotional side effects of cancer, isolation, broken identity, and fear, and addresses how to deal with that. And we're going to meet her after the break. And we're going to hear now from a doctor diagnosed with cancer who credits her survival to early screening and annual mammograms. Don't forget, Uncomfortable Conversations is sponsored by Thriving Women University, an affiliate of the Thriving Women Network. If you want to produce your very own franchise show, TWN provides the media network training, coaching, and mentoring to do just that. For more information, visit our website, thrivingwomennetwork.com. We'll be right back after the video.
So my name is Rima Batra. I am a medical oncologist, hematologist, and I treat all cancer types. I see blood disorders. One of the most common cancers I see and treat is breast cancer. It was a busy time of the year. It's always very busy at work, and I had to do my mammogram. So I thought I would be in and out in 20 minutes like I always had been, but this time was different. After the mammogram was done, on the first pass, the radiologist came in and asked me to do ultrasounds of both sides. And on that ultrasound is where they found the tumor. And this is when I started to worry a little bit. At the time of the diagnosis, my kids were 7, about to be 8. So I had to tell them things in a simple way. I didn't tell them right away because the day I found out was December 23rd, so I didn't want to ruin Christmas. After we went through those festivities, I did sit them down and I explained that I would need surgery because I was sick. The biopsy was initially an invasive ductal carcinoma and a very slow-growing appearing tumor, so it was a very favorable looking tumor to begin with. But you don't know your stage until after your surgery. Because I was diagnosed at such an early stage, I didn't need a big surgery, and so my recovery from that was very fast, and I didn't need chemo. So my kids never really saw me looking like I was going through something very severe, and I'm glad for that. I can 100% say the mammogram saved my life. We are such busy women. We take care of families, we have work, we have social lives, we have hobbies. Make time for your medical care because it can change the entire course of your life in just a matter of 30 minutes.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations. And if you're just tuning into the show, our topic is how to have a conversation about a cancer diagnosis. And we have an extremely qualified person today to enlighten, encourage, and empower us on how to have this cancer conversation with our family. Lauren Huffmaster, welcome to the stage here. You're a metastatic breast cancer survivor of 6 years and the founder of the Adventure Therapy Foundation and the podcast Adventures with Scars, as well as a co-creator of the app Rise. Lauren addresses and acknowledges the emotional side effects of cancer, isolation, broken identity, and fear. So thank you so much for joining our conversation today, Lauren. And looking at your website, what stands out is that there was a different Lauren pre-diagnosis to the Lauren post-diagnosis, right?
Yeah, before I was diagnosed with cancer, I was a young mom. I was a teacher. I was very, very busy raising my children. When I was diagnosed, my kids were 2, 4, and 6. So I had been pregnant and nursing and just raising children for years. And that was the focus of my life.
And so on your website, you've made a profound statement that cancer is the calling of your life, and it's through your brokenness that you hope to demonstrate love. And so if this is you now, who was the Lauren prior? I mean, you've already spoken to us about who was Lauren prior to that 37-year-old Lauren who got the stage 4 cancer diagnosis. How can you say that it's the calling of your life? Explain that to us.
I had always wanted to have a voice, something very specific. I always felt that I would have a very specific message, essentially, to live out. And when I was diagnosed with metastatic disease, I realized that this was the moment. I'd already been living for 2 years with stage 3 cancer. So I knew what it was like to look at someone who was stage 4. You sort of watch them from afar because you didn't want to bother them, but you really wanted to know, like, if they're going to live out my worst case scenario, what is that going to look like? What's possible for me? And so when I was diagnosed stage 4, I realized I would be that person. I would be the person where people are watching and saying, if I were ever diagnosed, if my cancer relapsed, or if I was diagnosed stage 4, what would my life hold? What would be available to me? And when I was diagnosed, I really wanted that vision, that image that people held, to be something of hope. I wanted to live a life that taught them that even in a terminal diagnosis, you can have purpose, you can have joy, you can have hope, you can continue to live well because you're still alive. And so when I was diagnosed, this is what I felt deeply in my soul, that I wanted to live well, have a voice, and continue to spread hope despite my circumstances.
So how old were you when you got your first diagnosis of cancer? So first of all, you were diagnosed with stage 3, and then sometime later it metastasized into stage 4. Is that what happened?
Correct. I was diagnosed stage 3 when I was 35, and I went through almost 2 full years of treatment because they saw that it was fast growing and they wanted to take extreme caution. So it wasn't until my final surgery for stage 3 that they did a PET scan to confirm the margins. And they found at that PET scan that I was already stage 4. So I never really exited treatment. I just moved straight from stage 3 and into stage 4 treatment.
So what mental, emotional, and physical changes happen immediately after receiving news like that, Hannah? Because that's one of the things that your organization deals with. So how did it hit you?
When I got the news, I initially went into a state of absolute despair. I think any young mom, any person perhaps, goes into an initial response of despair because we've been taught so well that cancer equals death, especially stage 4. And so just like anyone else, I rushed into a dark room, I shut myself in, and I felt like that darkness sort of entered into me. And for the first few months, the first 10 weeks, I really lived in a cycle of trying to die better. And this was my life. I woke up every day and said, what can I do for my family to ensure I die better? Because in my mind, we had already done everything we could for stage 3. We had tried to kill it and it didn't die, it spread instead. So I didn't have any hope that new treatments would bring change at that point. And so I went through this cycle. I'd wake up, I'd clean out my closet, I'd separate my things into piles for each of my girls. I would continue to try to die better until one day I realized this wasn't allowing me to live at all. I had already essentially stopped living. I wasn't doing anything that would inspire my girls. I wasn't ever getting closer to dying better. There's always more things to do. And so I stopped one day and felt very stuck and realized that if I continued in this way, my life would get smaller and smaller. It would be completely defined by fear. And essentially from that moment forward, my legacy would be nothing but fear. And I didn't want that. I knew that that was not the path I wanted. And in that moment, I decided to sort of look in the other direction. Instead of getting smaller and smaller, how could my life get bigger and bigger? And how can my impact grow? How can my legacy grow despite my circumstances, despite the length of my life? How could a legacy grow? And that's when I decided to embrace a different perspective. And I called that irrational optimism because there was nothing that changed. My diagnosis didn't change. My scans didn't change, but something inside of me had to change in order for me to live differently. And so whether it was rational or not, it was definitely irrational. I chose to believe that good things could come from this. And I began to live differently. I immediately founded a foundation, and I started on a path of hope, of encouragement, of finding purpose and serving others.
Wow. And you've actually just won the Jefferson Award in the state of California for your services to cancer patients. So congratulations and kudos. But let me ask you a question. How did you prepare to have that cancer conversation with your children? How did you do it? What advice can you give others going through what you're going through?
Parenting through cancer is very difficult. As a mother, our number one job is to make sure our children aren't hurt, like we protect them their whole lives. But then all of a sudden, it's me, it's my story that could potentially bring them hurt, right? That could wound them. And so this balance of how do you protect your children? How do you prepare your children for life while you are the one that potentially brings that pain into their circumstances? It's very difficult. But I took a very strong stance at the beginning that honesty was definitely the way to go. I knew that if I began to limit what they knew about my life, if I limited my emotional response or my diagnosis or anything from them, I was essentially creating walls between me and them. I was limiting how much access they had to me and to who I was into my life. And I knew that could not lead me anywhere that would be meaningful long term. And so I took a strong stance of honesty toward them. Now, and originally they were 2, 4, and 6. So the honesty had to do with me losing my hair and things that they could see and perceive. But now I've been living with cancer for 8 years. And so their questions have emerged and grown. Their maturity has grown. There's always a breaking point where you see them come home from school one day and they have a different look on their face when they ask you about cancer. And you know somebody at school told them something, and you just want to make sure that they feel safe in their relationship with you. I can't control how cancer really changes them, but I can control how safe they feel between me and them. And so they can bring me their questions and I will give them an honest answer. And this is really important to me in how I've raised my children.
And you also mentioned the spouse pays an emotional burden equal to the survivor. So can you share us what that experience was for you and your husband?
I think this can't be understated. When we think of cancer, and we often think of the patient, so how the person's body is changing through a treatment, but we don't often talk about the emotional impact of cancer. And my emotional impact, which meaning the fear I carry, the how I look into my future, and I have to see a completely different future for myself. My isolation because my treatments limit me, or people, as you mentioned earlier, sort of step away because they're not comfortable with my circumstances. These are not shifts that only I go through. This is something my husband experiences and my children as well. And so I call them co-survivors. We are all surviving cancer. All of our lives are being shifted by cancer. And so our emotional health, I believe, my husband's emotional health and mine have deeply been impacted by cancer. And so, yes, this is very difficult. It's difficult for a marriage. Half of my marriage has been impacted by cancer and all that that means. And it's very, very difficult and exhausting. But because, again, we lean on honesty in our marriage, when he is tired and I am tired, we just talk about being tired. We can't fix it, but at least we're honest and we know we're still there for each other.
Well, that's great, because what I write about is actually for women who are on their own, where the husbands have gone for whatever reason, or their spouses their attentions are elsewhere. So it's always fabulous to hear about these wonderful guys who stand by their ladies when they go through cancer. I think that's terrific. And after the break, we'd love you to talk about your Adventure Therapy Foundation. Definitely, we've got a lot more to talk about. And we'd also love you, our viewers, to join our conversation. We've got a private Facebook group called Thriving Women TV, and you can post your questions or comments there. We've got, of course, we're very grateful to Thriving Women University, because that's our sponsor and it's an affiliate of the Thriving Women Network. And if you want to produce a franchise show of your own, TWN provides the media network training, coaching, and mentoring to produce your very own franchise show. For more information, visit our website, and we'll be right back after a video.
Your family is your world. When you're diagnosed with cancer, everyone is affected. And although tough times can pull us apart, it's often said struggles can bring us closer together. I'm Diana Sundberg, manager of the Child Life and Creative Arts Therapy Department at UC Davis Children's Hospital. I'm also a certified child life specialist. Now you may be wondering, how do I even talk to my kids about cancer? You don't want to have this talk. You're nervous, and you know they will be too. For starters, we need to be real. This will most likely be the toughest conversation you'll ever have. Even specialists trained to talk to kids will tell you it's never easy. There is no script. There's no list of magic words. Secondly, it's better if the information comes from you. Don't avoid it. Putting it off will probably make things harder. The topic will come up. If it's not with you, then they will probably talk with a friend, or even worse, a stranger. Look at this as a chance to come together, to grow closer. Talking about it early helps your child feel included in the family loop. Delaying the conversation breaks trust. Your child may feel left out, like they're a less important member in the family. Remember, kids need time and space to process feelings just like anyone else. The best place to process is with you. Ask a question, then listen. The conversation will unfold more naturally this way. Questions should be open-ended. If you can, avoid yes/no questions. Begin with what the child already knows or observes. Maybe they've noticed mom crying, or how often dad goes to the doctor. Perhaps someone else is taking them to school. You might ask, tell me what you think is happening with mom or dad. Tell me, what do you know about cancer? Share with me what you are angry, frustrated, sad, worried about right now. Insert any emotion you detect. What questions do you have? Repeat these questions. Circle back to them throughout the conversation and throughout treatment. Listen for self-blame. Children often think it's their fault. They may think they've caused this to happen. If so, clear up this misconception. Let the child lead. Listen to their responses. Observe, love them through these moments. Let them feel scared, angry, or upset. Acknowledge their feelings. Their emotions are okay. Be sure to share your feelings too. Don't mislead them or make false promises. During your conversation, watch for fidgeting or signs of fear, anger, or other cues that signal the information might be too much at that time. Relax. Take the pressure off this talk and keep it short. It doesn't have to happen all in one sitting. It's a process, and it can be overwhelming. Continue to have these conversations over time. Let them be themselves. Kids are kids. Protecting their sense of normalcy is important. Make sure they have fun, go to school, hang out with their friends, and stay involved in their normal activities. If they want to help, suggest simple ways to include them. They could draw you a picture, do simple house chores, or even play with a sibling. Also, check out our website if you need it. So, will this conversation be tough? Yes, but it can help bring you and your child closer. It can decrease the stress and worry for you and your child. It can help you be more attentive to their cues and emotions. It can be a true bonding.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations. If you're just tuning into our show, our topic today is how to have a conversation about a cancer diagnosis. It's been such a pleasure having our guest enlighten, encourage, and empower us on how to have this cancer conversation with our family. Lauren Huffmaster is a metastatic breast cancer survivor of over 6 years and the founder of Adventure Therapy Foundation, a co-creator of the Rise app. The app Rise, and she addresses and acknowledges the emotional side effects of cancer, isolation, broken identity, and fear. Thank you for joining our conversation. And Lauren, before the break, you were talking about the burden that children and spouses pay, even though they are not diagnosed with cancer. Can you tell us more about the fear, isolation, and broken identity that must be addressed?
Absolutely. In my time serving the cancer community, I listened to a lot of people. I listened to their stories because I found that most people have a story that they need to sort of unburden themselves with. And when I began to help people, before I really had a direction, I just listened, and I listened all day long to lots of people. And what I found was most people were struggling with fear, isolation, and broken identity. And this theme just kept emerging over and over. And since that time, I have really dug into these concepts, and I find that they are human experiences, but they're really elevated during the cancer experience. And so I've actually defined these as the emotional side effects of cancer. So much effort and work has been put into defining the physical nature of cancer, but we've not really spent much time looking at the emotional nature of cancer. And this is something that should not be overlooked. It's not only impacting the patients, it's like you say, impacting those around us. And so its influence is showing up in so many more lives than just the cancer experience. So we want to look into and be more aware of what's happening in our emotional health so that we can truly heal from the cancer experience.
And are there any teachable life strategies that you've used as a survivor for yourself, for your family members, anything like that?
Absolutely. I believe first and foremost, acknowledging that this is typical. If you have experiencing fear right now, even if you're years post-treatment, if you're still experiencing fear, you still feel isolated, like you're not really connected to the people that you used to be connected to. Or if you struggle with this idea of identity, like who are you? Who will you be? What can you rely on? This is normal. This is typical. And so I think if we can just start there, we can better understand how to heal, how to grow in that. Because when we're trying to deny it or push it down or hide this, then we have an extra layer of fear and shame on top of what we're actually experiencing. So if we could just start as a society saying, those impacted by cancer are going to have an emotional response, and this is normal. That is a great beginning, because then we can have a conversation with those around us. We don't have to hide anymore. And I think if we start to have these conversations, we'll find that our loved ones need to have the conversations too. Their lives also shifted. Now, in the past, when someone was diagnosed like me, my lifespan would have been very, very short. And so I don't believe in generations past, we would have had time to have these conversations. But today we're seeing so many medical breakthroughs that someone with even a very bad diagnosis, a metastatic diagnosis with extreme risk, living for a decade, guys. And so it's time for us, we have the time to actually address our emotional needs, and think that this is a brand new era, a time for us to start looking into this.
Yeah, that's all wonderful, suggestions there. And is there any life lessons that you learned from your children on how to thrive?
When I saw my children at the beginning, they were living treatment to treatment just like me. And I watched them one day and I realized the childhood had sort of exited their lives. They were living in a cycle of sort of negative circumstances to negative circumstance. They were living mom sick to mom sick. And I realized that is not something I wanted for them. I really wanted them to have a thriving childhood. And so I had to intentionally create space in their life for fun, to plan for fun, give them things to look forward to. And I think this is important for every family. Be intentional. Look into your circumstances, even your mental health, and look and plan for what you want. It's easy to get into a pattern, into a rut, and just let life happen. But if we want to thrive as a family, if we want to grow emotionally, we have to plan for that. We have to take steps forward. And I definitely learned this from my children.
Beautiful. And in 2017, you founded Adventure Therapy Foundation, a nonprofit that exists to give families impacted by cancer the opportunity to find healing through cancer coaching and emotional release in outdoor retreats. Since then, the nonprofit has helped hundreds of families deal with the emotional side effects of cancer and make memories. So, Lauren, what inspired the name and what makes your organization unique for others?
When I began Adventure Therapy, I went out into the wilderness of Yosemite and backpacked for a few days to try to find in myself what I wanted to do. And I started with adventure because adventure pulls us out of our current perspective. Especially if you're in treatment, you sort of go from small room, from doctors to radiation rooms to chemo rooms, and you start to feel boxed in, like your life is sort of disconnected boxes all along the way. And I wanted people to feel the opposite experience. I wanted them to feel the vastness of a horizon or the top of a mountain in their heart, in their emotions. And so for me, what gave me that was this idea of stepping out of what is known and moving into a different space, which comes from adventure, taking little risks on your own terms. And I think that's really important. And so I started Adventure Therapy, and I started with very key principles. The whole family is impacted. We're not talking about just the patient. We serve the whole family. We're really looking at shifting perspectives of the whole family. The whole family needs that shift. And then finally, we want to address the emotional and mental health piece of cancer. There's so many organizations looking at the physical nature, prevention, treatment, all of these things, but we wanted to stand apart from the crowd and do something that looks at the emotional impact of cancer and on your relationships. And so this is really our driving force.
And some of us know about earthing and how therapeutic it can be. Can you give us a brief explanation of what that is and tell us about some other programs that you implement that you feel are needed for cancer families?
Yeah, we want to make sure that first of all, when you get into nature, they've proven that just a 30-minute walk in nature can change how your body processes, and it can actually increase your ability to kill cancer for 30 days. So it's amazing what nature can do with your body, with your emotions, how it resets you. And so there's tons of research about nature therapy, adventure therapy, and how this is beneficial. Also, when you go into adventure with other people, it strengthens relationships. So there's so many benefits just to get out and to try something new. I think even more with cancer, because again, you've been physically limited if you've been in treatment, you've been emotionally limited in this survival mode, and you have to have a reset button. Essentially, you have to say, like, the threat is over, and now we're starting something new. And our adventures are really trying to teach families that your threat is over. The treatments perhaps are over. Now it's time to start a new season of life, and give yourself that permission to do that. And so these are really important for our programs And then we back it up with a lot of educational materials around the emotional side effects of cancer, trying to stimulate conversation within the family.
And when we come back, we will talk about your Adventure with Scars podcast. But for right now, I want to remind everybody that Uncomfortable Conversations is sponsored by Thriving Women University, an affiliate of the Thriving Women Network. If you want to produce a franchise show, TWN provides the media network training, coaching, and mentoring to produce your franchise show. For more information, visit our website.
A cancer diagnosis is life-changing, not only for the person diagnosed with the cancer, but it also affects their family and friends. If you have children, or if you have a child, should you tell them that you have cancer? This is a question I get asked all the time, and in my opinion, the answer is yes. You should tell your children that you have cancer. So what may be the possible effects if you do not tell your children? Number 5. Children are more intuitive than we give them credit. They will sense that something isn't quite right. There's something off with the routine, you're going to the hospital more often, there seems to be more stress and perhaps sadness in the house, and they will be wondering what is up. Number 4, children may blame themselves. We know that children, they have a fertile imagination, and they may be wondering whether they've done something wrong to cause this upset, especially if this isn't talked about openly. Number 3, children may feel excluded. They may feel that they are not important enough or may even feel isolated. If previously there is a sense of togetherness in the family and all of a sudden things have shifted, they may feel alone with worries they can't talk about with anyone. Number 2, they may find out from other friends or family members. You see, keeping a secret can be quite hard and stressful, and it's always a possibility that children may find out the news from a different source. This can make the discussions about the cancer diagnosis in the future even more difficult. They may also feel angry and hurt that you didn't feel you could tell them yourself in person. And lastly, they may feel scared. If they sense something is wrong but don't really know why, they may feel scared and vulnerable. They know something is up but nobody's talking about it. And they may not feel able to ask questions, and as a result, they worry even more. Talking about cancer to anyone can be challenging and difficult, let alone doing it with children. But the benefits of doing this can be huge. It can bring you closer together as a family. You can feel unburdened by not having to keep a secret. And the children know that you are there to provide support for them. And so there will be trust instilled between yourself and the children, which is something really important, especially during challenging times. The children will also feel valued as they have been part of this discussion. They have also been given permission and the space to openly talk about their worries and concerns. So are there things you can do in preparation? Familiarize yourself with your diagnosis and gather as much information as you can. You can tell your breast care team that you are going to tell the children, and they may have other advice to give you. Schedule it in your diary and block out time. Make sure you will be around afterwards to provide support for them. You may want to do it over the weekend, for example, and it's best not to do it before bedtime, as they will ruminate over it all night. If you have more than one child, try to break the news with them together. If you can't do this, try to get the timing as close as possible. This way, there is no wondering why other siblings were told first. Try not just to tell the older children or eldest child only. This can be quite burdening on them. If there are 2 parents, it's best for both to be present at the same time, which will give them a sense of unity and togetherness. If you're on your own, perhaps have a close friend that your children know, so that they can provide support for yourself as well as the children. But if you feel you can do it yourself and you would rather do it yourself, then that's absolutely fine. Whatever works best for you. And lastly, anticipate possible questions they may ask and prepare answers for them. Think about the language you will use and make it simple for them to understand. So, when should you tell them? It is never a right time, but this doesn't mean that it should be avoided. You should tell them as early on as possible, as the longer you leave it, the more stressful it will be to keep it a secret. You may want to wait though until you have a treatment plan and you know what lies ahead. If you do it that way, there is less unpredictability and the children will know their direction of treatment. How should I tell them? Well, I would suggest you make it as a conversation. Ask them what they know and let that guide where the conversation goes. Listen to their concerns and worries and try to answer their questions in a simple way for them to understand. Explain to them what the next few months may look like based on what the treatment plan is, whether they are with hospital visits, if you're going to have surgery or chemotherapy treatment. And if you can, you may want to explain how these treatments may affect you so they can be prepared. I would also encourage them to ask questions. What you think they want to know may not be the same as what they want to know. And it's actually okay to say, I don't know, to their questions. But at the same time, reassure them that you will find out what the answers to their questions are and get back to them. Try not to dismiss their questions, worries, or fears. Do acknowledge them. Reassure them that this is not anybody's fault. Cancer can just happen. And younger children may feel that they can catch cancer. So reassuring them that this is not the case can be helpful too. Let them know it's okay to hug, kiss and cuddle, and that these normal behaviors can continue without causing harm. Talking about cancer can be challenging, and don't worry if the chat doesn't go to plan. This is the first conversation of many, but at least it has started.
Some great information there. I think that you can really take away most of what was said there and go and use that right away if you have to deal with telling your children about cancer. I thought that she did a fantastic job of explaining that. And that is our topic today. You're tuned to Uncomfortable Conversations, and our topic today, how to have a conversation about a cancer diagnosis. And we are very grateful to have a very qualified person here with us to enlighten, encourage, empower us to have this conversation with our family. It's Lauren Huffmaster, metastatic breast cancer survivor of over 6 years, and she's also the founder of the Adventure Therapy Foundation and a co-creator of the app Rise. Lauren addresses and acknowledges the emotional side effects of cancer, isolation, broken identity, and fear. Well, thank you for coming back into our studio, Lauren. And let me talk to you about your podcast. You have a podcast called Adventure with Scars. What's the vision, mission, and impact of that?
Adventures with Scars is a conversation really about this idea of the emotional side effects of cancer. This is a phrase I've made up. I'm trying to define what it feels like to experience cancer. And it's really never been defined before. And so by bringing words to the experience of cancer, I'm hoping to empower people to be able to take those words and carry them into their family and have really meaningful conversations about what's really going on inside of them as they walk out this cancer experience. And so the vast majority of our conversations on Adventures with Scars are with others who have been impacted by cancer, a lot of metastatic women, really, because those are my friends and those are the people who are drawn to my story. And we want to make sure that their stories are heard because they've been living with cancer the longest, most likely. And so we want to talk about if they have experienced fear, isolation, and broken identity. And because we want to affirm that these are typical experiences. And then at the end of the podcast, we always end with a question. What is the gift of cancer? And this is it's sort of mind-boggling that I could ask that question, but I honestly believe that in every circumstance, even in cancer and metastatic cancer, there is good. We can find good in every circumstance. And I want to remind people that no matter where they are, no matter what today holds, if you look for the good, you will find something that you couldn't access otherwise. And I think cancer really can help us grow. We can experience post-traumatic growth, and we can experience depth of relationship and depth of conversation because of cancer. And so these are the really important topics that we're talking about on the podcast.
And tell our viewers about your Rise app. What does that do?
Yeah, so my app is really looking at connecting people. Everything I do, you'll see a theme. I'm trying to minimize fear, isolation, and broken identity. The app is looking at connecting people in geographic regions. So as someone like me, well, today I have no hair, but for 6 years of my treatment, I looked like everyone else. I was a busy mom. Even though I was in treatment, I had the hair. I wasn't the stereotypical breast cancer patient, but I was probably walking past dozens of other women who were also in treatment for cancer, but I didn't know them. Sometimes cancer, especially after treatment, is an invisible disease. You don't know who in your community is impacted. So it makes that isolation piece even more difficult to overcome. So my app really looks at connecting people in a geographic region who are impacted by cancer and connecting them to the nonprofits and the events that are there to support them. Any resource that would support them in their region, it will push that to the person so that they know they have the opportunity to find friends and eliminate that isolation, to find information to minimize that fear. And then the last piece is they can actually create events themselves and to connect with other people. So it's that creating this new identity, this post-cancer identity. Who do I want to be? Who am I today? So that could just mean leading hiking groups or a book group or anything, but it's this re-engaging in who you will become post-cancer. And so the app does all those three things, and it's very, very important and meaningful, I think, in the future of cancer. Like I said, as we live longer, we need more tools. We need different tools for living with cancer.
So how do people get in touch with you? You've got so many resources to offer people. How do people get in touch with the foundation that you've set up? How do they hear the podcast? Is there a website also that people can connect with you through?
Absolutely. Our website is adventuretherapyfoundation.org. And on that website, you can find the podcast, you can find blogs, you can find educational resources easily. You can also follow me on social media, which is just at Lauren Huffmaster. And you can follow my thoughts and my cancer journey as well.
Terrific. Well, Lauren, we could probably have a 2-hour show with you. You've got so much to tell us. Thank you so much for being a guest today. And don't forget, Uncomfortable Conversations is sponsored by Thriving Women University, an affiliate of the Thriving Women Network. If you want to produce a franchise show, TWN provides the network training, coaching, and mentoring to do just that. For more information, visit our website, thrivingwomennetwork.com. We'll be right back after the break.
I'm not sure how to tell you this, but I have cancer.
What? I can't believe this. I don't even know what to say. If you stay positive, you can beat this. No. Yikes. My grandma just died from cancer. No. I heard sugar fuels cancer. Stay away from that. No way. You do look great, though. Alexa, what do you say to a friend who is just diagnosed with cancer?
This is hard. There is no perfect response. You may feel overwhelmed and helpless, or wish you could make it better. Before you know what your friend needs, well-intentioned spontaneous comments that may not be received well include giving unsolicited advice, comparing it to your own experiences, or trying to find a silver lining. Here are some guidelines for what can be helpful. Lead with empathy by acknowledging their feelings. Be curious about their experience and be cautious about making assumptions.
I hear how hard this must be. I want you to know that I am here for you. Do you want to tell me more about it?
Yeah, it is. I'm not quite ready to talk about it, but thought you should know.
Ask what would be helpful to them or offer something practical to support them.
Thanks for telling me. I'm so glad you did. Is there anything you need?
I'm not really sure right now.
Just let me know what I can do. I really am happy to bring over a meal, give you a ride, or even help relay information to our friends.
Stay engaged by checking in, even if you don't get a response.
Please know I care a lot about you. I'll keep checking in with you and can suggest ways I might help. It's okay if you don't respond.
This means a lot. Thanks for being so thoughtful. The love and support is really important to me right now.
Oh, thanks, Alexa.
You are welcome. Have a nice day.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations, and we want to thank our viewers from around the world for supporting today's topic on how to have a conversation about a cancer diagnosis. We also want to extend a special thank you to our guest today, Lauren Huffmaster, metastatic breast cancer survivor, founder of Adventure Therapy Foundation, and also the podcast Adventures with Scars, as well as the co-creator of the app Rise. You can find out more about all that on the website adventuretherapyfoundation.org, adventuretherapyfoundation.org. We hope that you were enlightened, encouraged, and empowered to be able to have this conversation with your children, grandchildren, and friends so that they can not just survive, but thrive.
And if you have any comments about today's topic or for us, you can join our Thriving Women TV Facebook group and post your experience so that we can learn. Don't forget to tune into Every Child Can Learn TV today at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Their mission is to reimagine education and make learning simple for children. Uncomfortable Conversations is sponsored by Thriving Women University, an affiliate of the Thriving Women Network. If you want to produce your own franchise show, TWN provides the media network training, coaching, and mentoring to do just that. For more information, visit our website, thrivingwomennetwork.com.
And we'll be back next week with more Uncomfortable Conversations.